Hey everybody, this is Tom at Talent Guitar Works. It's Sunday, it's the start of another week. I'm hoping this week isn't anywhere near as hectic as last week. Last Monday started with my inspection from Charlotte County Building Department on my rough-in electrical, which causes a little bit of anxiety. We did the job right. This isn't my first rodeo, and they came out and inspected it, and that was actually the easiest thing that happened this week. Because right after that, I called FPL and had to call a number on the east coast of Florida for FPL to put my name on a premise account, and everything went haywire with mixed communications from there. Took several phone calls and emails to get it right. I went to Home Depot and I checked on my pro credits on my account and realized I had none for the last 24 months and had to correct that with a lot of phone calls and emails. And Home Depot made it all right. They were like, oh, okay, we could do that. And they fixed it. And by Friday, both of those were right as rain. In the meantime, I built this drum riser behind us. And for the rehearsal space, it's plywood on top of 2x6 joists, and it's got three 3-inch casters underneath it, or 6 3-inch casters underneath it, 3 aside, to roll it around so I could clean underneath it. It's got the carpet on the top, and it's got this framework with the wings to hold the plexiglass to protect the other band members from the sound pressure levels that come off those drums when the acoustic drummer plays dynamically. So that's what we got going there. So for the drummers in the house, that's what I got. Now, I also got to talk to one of the subscribers on the phone this week, and he's in the Orlando area up in Winter Park. He's got a 1970s era Fender Telecaster that needs a refret. And we talked about the repair shops that were in the Orlando area that have closed down in the years. I used to live in St. Cloud, which is about 29 miles south of Orlando, and the graying of the industry and why there aren't as many repair shops in the area and so forth, and vintage guitar shows and all that stuff. So I made a suggestion, since I'm 4 hours away with moderate traffic, that he might want to look at the Fender shop online and order a replacement neck, an American Telecaster replacement, and the neck profile that he wants, and the neck radius that he wants, with the number of frets and the type of fretboard he wants. They will deliver it to his house for probably less than $500. He can play the Telecaster with that until he sells the Telecaster with the original neck as is. And why do I say that? There are 3 types of vintage guitar enthusiasts in this world, and they're all in the same boat. The first one is the one that doesn't play guitar but thinks they're art forms and wants them as is, whether in playable condition or not. The second one is the one who is the player in search of mojo and tone that doesn't exist in the modern guitars because they're all handled and played by infidels. I'm just making that part up. The third one is the guy who bought the guitar as a kid, or his dad bought it for him as a kid, and woke up and looked in the mirror this morning and said, not only am I vintage, my guitar is too, and I just want it to be able to play. They're all in the same boat, they're welcome in that boat, and they're okay. They all have their own little needs and wants and stuff. So having a neck that's original to the guitar body that needs a neck refret isn't that bad a thing. Now the funny thing and ironic thing about that is my buddy John brought by this, a 1977 F-style tuner, bullet truss rod, big headstock, 7.25-inch radius fretboard, maple board, on an ash body with the black 3-ply pickguard, and not the 3-bolt neck, but a 4-bolt modification he had done by a luthier in New York State while he was living up there. Now, he did a really good job. I'm not throwing shade at all at the luthier. Excellent job on the 4-bolt conversion. What he did do, though, is he took the tilt-o-matic or micro-tilt discs out of the neck and the body and the set screw. He did put a shim in. Over time, that shim is compressed. And the problem now is the neck angle is not correct because the saddles have to be decked and the string height is still too high. So those micro tilts create a different neck angle, much as his shim did when he originally put it in, and allowed for a lower action on the guitar strings. Now, John brought this guitar into me, not for that, but for a refret. That's why I said it was a little ironic. He came in with a 77 for a refret right after I talked to a subscriber on the phone. Now, refrets on vintage guitars, and this guitar will be 50 years old in 2 years, are difficult because you don't know how many refrets were done before, and you don't know the condition of the fret slots. You don't know if they put super glue in there or if they re-lacquered every time and that adhered the metal to the wood or made the wood around the fret slot brittle. Oh, that's a lot to say, right? First thing you have to do is tape off both sides of the neck with painter's tape right where the fretboard meets, the neck meets the top of the fretboard, right? Okay, that just gives it a little bit of protection. Then you want to get your soldering iron and set it to about 300 and hold it on each of the frets. That heat, while you hold it there for a little bit, will break that adhesion process from the lacquer to the metal or from the super glue to the metal, enough to where you can get your Stumac pliers, fret pulling pliers, and you notice they're ground flat on the top, and those 2 points come in contact right where it makes contact with the fretboard. So even the most worn out frets you can grab with these. Now people will say, well, you could use those nail puller ones they got, it's not that big a deal. See that groove in there and where those teeth are? It is a big deal. You can do it, but should you? Just buy the Stumac ones. And there are several other companies that make them also. Now you can grind these down. Have a glove, have water, and have patience, and have a grinding wheel that you're going to be able to replace because it's going to take a lot of material off the grinding wheel, and these are going to get really hot while you're holding them. Ask me how I know in the comments. So once I removed all of the frets, I had chip outs. Now anybody who says, I never get chip outs when I remove those frets, keep riding your unicorn pony in the pasture below the big rock candy mountain, because there isn't anybody I know that's done a refret on a vintage guitar that hasn't had some chip outs. To the point that Dan Earlywine did a video that I watched over 12 years ago on how to repair those chip outs. Now, if Dan's got to repair them, I'm guessing the rest of us are going to have to repair them too. So, once I had all the frets removed, I used a Teflon dam technique that Dan shows with super glue and maple sawdust to fill all those voids. I let that dry. I took a number 2 pencil and I scribbled on the neck. These are called witness lines or witness marks. I took my 7.25 sanding beam and sanded all the witness marks off. So the guitar is now 7.25 inches at the nut, all the way down to the heel. That's important because when you put the new frets in, if the guitar does not maintain radius, you will have high frets. There is nothing more heinous or wasteful than having to do a fret level and dress on a brand new refret. You're removing material that shouldn't have to be removed. Manufacturers aren't doing fret level and dresses right after they fret a guitar. I'm just saying. If your fretboard and your foundation are level, guess what? Your frets will be level, just like the walls of a house. If your foundation's crooked, your walls are crooked. That's just what it is. Start with the correct measurements and go from there. So, once I got the fretboard sanded flat, I applied 3 coats of lacquer using a brush, not a spray gun. I feel like I don't get as much material down when I spray, plus I got to clean the gun, plus I've got to use a spray booth, plus I have to wear a respirator, versus getting the Stumac lacquer that comes in the can and brushing it on. It's self-leveling. I got it on there in 3 coats. I didn't have to do anything but clean a brush. Now, you notice that the color matches the vintage color of the guitar, right? How did I do that without adding dye? I didn't remove all of the lacquer that was on the fretboard when I sanded it. I just went to the witness marks, right? And got those off. Now, if you spray or paint or brush 3 coats of lacquer on, At the end, you have one coat of lacquer. If you do 5 coats of lacquer, at the end you have one coat of lacquer. The nature of lacquer is it burns into the previous coats, forming a bond, a covalent bond, and becoming one coat, unlike urethanes and polys that form several thin layers. So it took the color that was in the original lacquer and it fanned it out into the new coats of lacquer. So I didn't have to use a couple drops of dye to get it the right color. Now you can do that, and Dan did a video on that one too. But once I had the lacquer on here, then I cleaned all the fret slots out using my hooked X-Acto knife, and the most important tool that you can get from StewMac for doing fret jobs, and it's also the cheapest, this baby right here. This thing is your go, no-go gauge for your fret slot depth. If you see the black line is inside the fret slot, that fret tang is going to seat perfectly. If it's above the fret slot, you better use that hand saw, that fret saw, and cut a little bit deeper in, or else you're going to have a problem seating that fret. So I used Fender frets that came in a package, and I don't know where I got those. Somehow I picked those up along the way someplace. And I put all those in using the fret press. I did not super glue the frets in because the fret slots were kind of tight. So once I pressed it in, I used a fret rocker on it and checked it, and no clicking. It was all level. So I used my handy dandy fret rocker, and all the frets were level. I let the guitar sit overnight, because if it's going to do something, it's going to do it then. Came back the next morning, put it through the fret press again, pressed them all in real good, ran it through the fret checker, making sure the rocker that it was done, and it's right. So I beveled the edges of it, leaving the masking tape, remember, that was on the painter's tape, and then I did the fine file work on it, and I even used the sanding beam to remove that last little bit of burr that you keep pushing with the file from side to side, and I did a video on that. And the fret job came out really nice. You can't see where I did the repair work to any of the chip outs. And it matches. So this guitar is going to be ready to go back to John as soon as we get the microtail parts in, and he'll be out there playing it again. So the next part of this is Victim of the Storm Part 2, which is Devin's RG Ibanez. And you notice the tuning machines are out of it. And the locking nuts off of it. And it's not on the guitar. Why is that? Well, it's simple. This thing is still at 28% moisture content. It's been 2 months. And if you look, there's a crack down the back of the neck, and I'm suspecting that was a truss rod crack from when this baby got soaked, because if you look, the grain lines match on both sides of it. So it's not a glue joint. Now the glue joints right here in the first and second fret on the treble and bass sides, there's still a little ridge there that I have to sand out. And that's where water got in there, and it just feels a little rough. It feels like the wood's 2 different sizes. So we're going to give this a little bit more time to dry out naturally. I can't use a heat gun on it because it's going to haze the finish of it, and that's just going to create another repair. Now, conversely, this is the body for that guitar. It's at 6%. It's ready to go. Now, somebody might say, well, why don't you just string it up and see what happens? Well, at 28% and with 10 gauge strings, that guitar neck's going to do some very unguitar neck-like things if I put 100 pounds of pressure on it, or 104 with the 10 gauge strings. It could bend, it could twist, it could warp, it could back bow, it could do any of those things. Because the wood is softer when it's wet, the cells are in there have absorbed that water and are holding them for some reason. You know, it's not saying the guitar is living and the wood's alive. It's just like a sponge. It picked up the water, now we gotta get the water out. So we're gonna work on that and continue to see if we can get it right. This is Tom at Talon Guitar Works. Remember, only half my ideas are any good. You gotta decide which half. And hope you guys subscribe, and we'll see you next week. My videographer is gonna start filming all the processes of repairs that I do in here, so you'll be able to see them at home and decide if you wanna try them yourself and get the tools that are necessary to do these jobs. You know, a lot of guys like working on their guitars like they used to like working on their cars. So take care, have a great week. We'll see you next time.